In Print Radio. In Print is a professional writers organization located in Rockford, Illinois. We're dedicated to providing resources and education off the page and on the air. Hello, I'm Bob Francis. Today, In Print member Ted Iverson is talking with author Shawn Weaver.
Hi, Shawn. Thanks for sitting down with us tonight.
My pleasure.
Well, before we get into the particulars on your writings, I'd like to know a little bit about you.
Well, born and raised here, Beloit, Wisconsin. I have wife Rebecca, 3 grandchildren, 2 daughters.
How long have you been writing, and what inspired you to start?
I've been writing my entire life. 3rd grade was my first major exposure to books. My dad gave me Ian Fleming's Goldfinger. I know it's kind of odd. It's an adult book, and I was only in 3rd grade, but I read everything all the time. My teachers freaked out because I was reading such an adult book, but it was good. I understood it. Took in everything that was written that Ian Fleming did after that. My first novel I wrote when I was in 6th grade. And by the time I graduated, I think I wrote maybe 8 by the time I graduated 12. Published? No, because back then, well, it wasn't that good. And then after graduation, I wrote for a few wrestling magazines, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, The Wrestler. I had a few articles posted. Nothing really big, nothing glamorous, no money income, just, hey, here's an article, I want to print it. And they're like, oh, yeah, sure. Then I wrote my first full-length novel, Soul Gemazena, which is still sitting in a box in my basement. I did send that one to TSR when TSR was still going. Tracy Hickman and Marcus Weiss read it. They liked it. They wanted to help me publish it through TSR. But then TSR went through their big shebang with the lady who bought them out and decided she wanted to make soap opera board games. Well, TSR kind of went in flux at the moment, and my book kind of got pushed to the side, and I got a little letter saying, hey, sorry, we like your book, but we can't do anything with it now.
And TSR was?
The guys who make the Dungeons & Dragons, Gary Gygax. Then after that, with life in general, being busy, I kind of took a break from writing, but I was still intensely in wrestling. My dad was a big wrestling fan, so was I. Well, I had this huge amount of wrestling information. Champions, when they won, where they won, how long they held their titles, dating all the way back to 1800s. Well, I ran into a former wrestler by the name of Royal Duncan, Duncan Publishing now, and he wrote a book called Wrestling Title and Histories. And I purchased a copy, I read it, and I'm like, I got more information than this guy got. I mean, what he has here is 300 pages. I'm sitting at home with like 1,000. So I contacted Duncan and I said, hey, I can help your book be a little bit better. Are you interested? He's like, yeah, sure, let's see what you got. So I sent him all my pages. So we're talking 30 manila envelopes of different stuff. And I doubled the size of his book just from my work alone. That was my first published as a contributing editor work.
Was there any money involved in that? Or
no, I did that just free will because I enjoy wrestling and Duncan was a cool guy. And yeah, let's have some fun. I did a few other books like most other writers do. It just end up in a box sitting somewhere. So one day they may get pulled out.
What did your family think of your writing?
That's a mixed bag because some of them think it's a great thing. I think my dad would be really proud of me. He's no longer here, but he read all the time. And I'm sure he would get a kick out of everything I do. My mom's very proud of me. And there's other people in the family that are like, okay, well, why are you doing that? But that's normal with anything you do. And
they don't understand sometimes that, a lot of people think that what are you writing for if you're not making money? But that's a whole other topic of conversation, as you know, as a writer. So.
Yeah.
Other than your family, can you tell us of one person or organization that maybe has supported you and the impact that it may have had on your writing career?
Positive or negative?
Either way, whatever impacted your career.
Negative, like most people nowadays, self-published, iUniverse is a big negative. With the influx of self-publishing companies, one has to be really aware of what they're getting into. They're really good at first, helped me a lot. I learned a lot about self-publishing, but when it came down to the backing and support, wasn't there. As in a lot of people are finding out now by what's going on with the company. You, for one, was a big support. When we first started publishing, we all got together and started talking about what we wanted to do, where we wanted to go. Donny Light, one of my co-authors on the Ripper trilogy, he was a big boost, big backer, someone to bounce heads with, because you know how it is when you write with somebody, you don't always have the same idea. You have the ending that you want to get to, but how do you get there is always the hard part. It's a challenge, it's fun, but sometimes it's conflict.
Well, that leads us into another question then. You do write with Donny in the Ripper series in particular? And everyone has different styles of writing. How difficult, is it to work together and come up with an acceptable end product?
That's an interesting story. First time Donny and we met through Authors Review and Book Exchange on Facebook, which is a good spot for any new author to go to and find other people who would review your books, give you criticism, which is always good, and just general support. You, I, and he got together at Backyard Grill and we had a dinner. Donny goes, any of you guys want to get together and write a book? I thought that was a good idea. So I'd say 6 or 7 emails back and forth. What do you want to write on? What do you like? Want to do fantasy? Vampires were really big, and they still are. So we decided to do vampires, and I always wanted to do something on Jack the Ripper. We just winged it. We said, okay, how big a book do we want to do? Novella, novel length, 100,000 words, 40,000 words. We figured 40,000. It's a good break. That's the beginning of a standard size novel. So we basically tossed a coin in there and say, let's who goes first.
Right. So that leads us into the next question on that question. What's your process with Donny? I mean, how do you guys work together to make that series and that book? I mean, and was it one book to start with, and that's all you were going to do, and then it evolved into the 3-book series? Or?
All along, we planned on it being 3 books. Then we'd see where we'd go from there, whether we're going to do any more or not. When we flipped that coin, you go, okay, I want it. So we figured 1,000 words apiece. You write 1,000, send it to me. I'll read it, write 1,000, send it back to you. Then we bounce ideas off each other. And that's what we did. Boom, 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 back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Until, I would say, 40 emails, we had 40,000 words. Didn't always go smoothly because there's always one scene somebody would go, okay, well, that's not kosher. I don't like that. So we had to switch it up, which is always the butting of the heads, which is always the hard part because you like your scene, but the other person doesn't. Okay, well, you got to find the in-between to make both people happy.
Did that happen a lot?
At least once every book.
Well, that doesn't seem too bad, once every book.
Ripper's Wrath had happened more than that. Because we're so passionate about what was going on. And you want the best thing to come out. Donny's more analytical, more punctuation. I'm more get to it. That's the compromise you had to find between the two. You have to juggle it. That's about the only way to put it. And each one of us edited one version when it was done. I'd edit it, then send it to Donny, and he'd edit. Then it'd come back to me, and I'd read it over. Then you send it to an editor for them to look at and send it back to you. Then you both have to read that version and add your changes and send it back and forth. So you're talking a year-long process for one book.
That seems amazing to me because I've read the books, and they're seamless. You can't tell where one person wrote something and then the other person wrote something. That's what I always thought was amazing about that book. In that series is how seamless it all flowed together. You've written a lot of books, not all of them in the same genre. Could you tell us what some of those genres are, and if you have a favorite, why?
Well, started out with fantasy, Tides of War series. I do horror, and I'm right now working out drafts for a children's book for my granddaughter, Brooklyn, which is always the fun part of writing, because everyone has a niche. And I don't like the idea of being stuck in one place.
So don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, because you get an idea, run with it. I've had a lot of nights I wake up 2 o'clock in the morning, boom, hey, I got an idea, got to write down. You got to go with the flow. With my book series, Tides of War, it started out as one book. It took 11 years to get done because I wrote it, put it away for a long time, then finally got the urge to start writing again. So I pulled it back out, dusted it off, put the ending on it, then another idea came. So they kind of it fell together. So my first 3 books were fantasy. Then I plunged into horror with the Ripper trilogy. And then got Little Valley, Welcome to Plainfield, Wolves of Springfield, which I'll throw a little bit of home element into it. Wolves in Springfield, I didn't really realize I did it, but I threw my grandfather in the storyline. I based it in Springfield in the 1800s, just after the Civil War. I didn't realize until I got done the end of the book. When I got done with it, I'm like, wow, I put Grandpa in this.
Yeah, I think you could easily do that way as you're writing with your subconscious mind. When you're trying to develop characters, sometimes you can throw pieces of people into it. I happen to think that's kind of cool because it's a little homage to them. Do you find one genre more difficult than the other?
Not really. When I write, my characters take on a life of their own. You got a destination you want to go to, but you don't always get there because sometimes the characters just won't let it happen. very surprised at how many times I'm like, okay, this is going to happen because this is a really good idea. But as I'm writing it, a character does something that changes the entire story. And it just shoots off another way.
Yeah, I can agree with you there. I've had that happen to me too. Where do you get your information or your ideas on your books?
Well, fantasy, well, that's just your mind in general. Every kid grows up with dragons and wizards and witches. Horror is another aspect that can be complex. I have somewhat of put more of a bite into it, I guess. Welcome to Plainfield is based on Ed Gein. He's probably one of the most gruesome guys in Wisconsin history. I'm part of a Ghost Hunt of America paranormal group, and we went up there to his property and we did an investigation. We found a ton of paranormal evidence that would probably blow your mind away. I mean, it was just unbelievable what we found. And I'm like, wow, this would make a really good story. How can I take these photos, these EVPs that I've gotten, and do something with them? And I think I actually pulled together a really good story that would surprise most people by what we found. Little Valley. My mom wanted a love story. I'm not a mushy love story writing kind of guy, but I figured, let's try something. So I took a home element of family and a family's love for one another, made a town, Little Valley, just outside of Manitowoc, Wisconsin. If you look on a map and you read the book, you'll be able to find this valley. And made a ghost story of a house, which I think it's pretty warm. It kind of, there's an opening for another story at the end of it. The idea ever comes for another story, maybe not, who knows, but the chance is always there.
Yeah, and it's one of those never say never type of things.
We have to take a break, but we'll be back with more of Ted's interview with Shawn right after this. Welcome back to In Print Radio. In Print member Ted Iverson is talking with author Shawn Weaver.
As a writer, what do you think makes up a good story?
Passion. That's the main thing. When you write something, you got to put your heart into it, and you got to feel what the characters feel. Like you probably already know, like most writers know, you'll start a story and you'll get so far into it, and you go, there's nothing there. It started out great. It was a really hot story. But 5, 10, 15, even 300 pages down the line, it just goes, yeah. So you put it in the box. Maybe an idea will come later. Maybe not.
So when you put your book away and you kind of lose that idea, would you consider that a writer's block? And if you don't consider that writer's block, have you ever had it? And what do you do to overcome writer's block?
I've never really had writer's block. I get ideas all the time, and that's the hard part of keeping track of all the ideas. That's why I always have a notebook with me. Got a little thing on my phone so I can type in ideas. Got my Kindle with a little app in there that I can start writing. Wolves in Springfield, I actually wrote on my Kindle while I was on vacation. The idea just came, you just had to do it.
I've written stuff on vacation, too. I think every writer has a notebook by their nightstand or carries it with them in their car. I know a lot of people have those little hand recorders now, so that's pretty interesting. On average, how long would you say that it takes you to write your books, start to finished product?
That depends. First book, 11, 12 years, because I put it away because I ran out of inspiration. Didn't come up, it wasn't a block, it was just life taking its general toll on, like happens to everybody else. I average 3 to 4 books a year, so you want to say a range of maybe 3 months to write a book. Last year, I wrote 3 books, first drafts of 3 books in probably 2 months. I spent the rest of the year doing the other drafts and flushing them out. That's the hard part. Getting the base concept down is nothing. Just filtering out all the oddball stuff and putting more passion into it is what takes more time. Every draft takes a little bit more time. I usually pull about 5 drafts for every book. Every short story, each time it grows, because you want to add to it. You don't always want to take away, but you want to give it a life of its own.
So you have the time to write the 3 to 4 books a year. That's pretty good, because a lot of times writers can only churn out one because, like you, we're all normal, everyday guys, and it's tough to find the time, even though you should make the time to write something every day, as you impressed upon me.
That's how they do it. Writers write. Wannabe writers talk about writing. I do 1,000 words every day, 365 days a year, first thing in the morning. Some people can't write in the morning, some people have to write at night. But you set aside a time every day to do it. Whether it's a draft, the first idea, whatever, do it. When you procrastinate, that's when your work doesn't get done. Because I've talked to many people. They're saying, oh, yeah, I got this book, blah, blah, blah. I've been working on it for a year and a half. Well, when's the last time you sat down with it and worked on it? Dead space. They can't tell you. Well, if you want to do something, do it. If that's your passion, 1% of all authors make money, make a living off of it. I've had top 100 books on Amazon all over the world. I've had one book that was number one in 8 countries at the very same time.
Which one was that?
Little Valley. Did I make a ton off of it? No. But I took the time to do it. I got the book done, then I started on the next.
Out of all the processes of writing, what's your favorite?
I hate the editing process because that's my hardest part. Punctuation, taking stuff away, I don't like that at all. The beginning of the creative process, which is the most challenging part, I think, has got to be the funnest part. Coming up with an idea, surprising yourself with what you can bring to the table.
I agree with you. Editing can be brutal, especially if you have an editor who really knows what they're doing and wants to help you improve your book, because they'll cut out a lot of the fat while not changing the story. But there's sometimes you think something should really be there and you know it's got to go deep in your heart, but you don't want to let go of it. So it can be pretty hard on you. Another question I had when I'm looking at your books, they all have really kind of cool covers. How do you come up with the ideas for your book covers, and do you do it or do you have somebody else help you?
My co-author for the Ripper trilogy, Donny, has his own book cover company. He created the covers for Ripper trilogy, Ripper's Row, Ripper's Revenge, and Ripper's Wrath. He did the cover for Little Valley, which just surprised me because I've never seen somebody layer photos together in such a way that looked haunting like that. I've never seen any professional book like that ever. I mean, you look in the old man's eyes and he's staring at you and you're like, ooh, geez, okay. Renee Reeskamp, she lives here in Rockford. She did the covers for Dark Caravan and Dragon's Chest. They're painted covers, which are really crisp for the story. She's also going to be working with me on my first children's novel. Her name's going to be right up there beside me because she's doing illustrations per chapter for the cover, for the back. With my other books and my short story that's on Amazon, Mississippi Dead, you want to find royalty-free photos or you want to pay them. I usually purchase a cover from Dreamscape, then have to edit down, make it larger, drop down to fit your needs, then overlay your words on top. With Mississippi Dead, which is a zombie story based on the Mississippi River, my 11-year-old daughter made that cover for me. She picked the photo out of Dreamscape. There's something about this photo that just fits the story. And what it looked like, it was a dark, bluish, foggy, morning-looking picture. But as she, blow it up. So I made it twice the size, blow it up again, made it bigger. And believe it or not, there was somebody standing with a shovel in the distance of that photo that she picked out of her eye. And I was like, wow, okay, I didn't expect that there because that's creepy. And it just made the cover go good. My wife helped me do the cover for Welcome to Plainfield, which is my Ed Gein story. Haunted house with a dead skull in the grass, which is pretty good.
Of course.
She designed that one for me.
So you have a little bit of help from everybody, just whoever comes up with a good idea based on the story then?
Well, sometimes not. You always want to take ideas,
I think that's a good idea to maybe get opinions and different views from people. Earlier, you'd mentioned that you are an independent or self-published, most people like to call it independent now, author. Have you ever queried traditional publishers before? And if so, how long was it before you decided to publish independently?
That's the hard part. Be published. There's a lot of people that are published. To get published in Penguin, Random House, a lot of those big names, you got to have an agent. But to get an agent, you got to be published. So that's kind of a circle that's closed. Okay, how do you break through that? Most people can't. 1 out of 100, 1 out of 1,000 will break through that. You send your book to a publishing house. Where does it go? It ends up in a slush pile, sitting in a stack for lowercase workers to go through and say, oh, well, this one's good, this one's bad. Oh, let's just throw it away. Now in today's market, that's not the way to go. Publishing with the help of Amazon being the forerunner in the group, you can do it by yourself. I've sent out letters, hundreds of letters to people. Sent my book and sit there and just wait. I've waited a year, I've waited 6 months, I've waited 4 weeks. And what is the response always? This is not right for us right now. Little Valley, this is just not good enough for us right now.
Yeah, I have a stack of those myself.
Okay, well, that's kind of odd. Little Valley, this is not good enough for us right now. I published it. A month later, number 1, 8 countries. It's just the way it is. And I say literally it's here, you got a little teeny weeny little box. This is the publishing company. You got a bigger box that's around it. These are all the people who are independently publishing. Who's making the money now? The people in the bigger box. This one person here may make $1 million. This person here may make 50 cents. But if you look at the whole box, the independent is where the money's at. Because Amazon gives you the chance to put your book out there and people will go, hey, this is great, and recommend it to somebody else. You walk into a bookstore, Barnes & Nobles, Borders, whatever, you see shelves. Those shelves are rented by the book companies. That's why their books are there. I've tried numerous times. I'm in Standard Stores, in Rockford because of the imprint. But I've been to other stores and they said, well, our space is rented. Tor paid for this space here. Berkeley paid for this space here. Penguin has this space here. We don't have space for you. That's the hard part.
That's an interesting fact. I didn't know that myself. Speaking of putting books into the stores, now even if you get a traditional publisher anymore, you still have to do most of the publicizing yourself. So how do you go about promoting your novels in yourself? How much time do you spend on it?
You can spend all day long touting how great your book is. I see that all the time. Read my book, read my book, read my book. After a while, you don't want to read their book because it's a bother. I would like to have a publicist, which I don't have and I can't afford. You got to be rich to have one of those. You got to be in the main houses to have stuff like that. People recommend blogging. I have a website, which gets pretty good rifle through. My big thing is I am on Amazon, and I've done like a lot of other writers say. If you have a big catalog, put a book out for free. You put a book out for free, people like it, they'll buy the other ones. And for me, that's what works. Every month I have something out there for free. Generally, it's Mississippi Dead, because that's a short story with first chapter previews of all my books. And I've found that people purchase that download, and they'll buy the others.
That's a good way to do it. Like you said, the blogging and the websites and the social media seems to be the way most independent authors go anymore.
Yeah, Facebook is, I want to say, probably the number one way to get known. I sit with 5,000 people. That's their max limit on my Facebook page. But if you got somebody that advertises you and say, hey, I just read his book, it's great, they put it on your website and their page, and somebody else will do the same.
Right. I'm on Facebook, and I've found that I've sold quite a few books through that way.
We'll be back with more of Ted's interview with Shawn right after this. In-Print Radio. In-Print member Ted Iverson is talking with author Shawn Weaver.
As far as in creating your books and writing them, has anything surprised you about yourself as you're writing them? Have you learned anything that you didn't know before?
I find that I can be a little bit more ruthless, because when you write a horror book, sometimes you want to be a little bit more intense. You kill off people that you don't actually think should, but it works out that way that they need to go. It's kind of odd to say, but that's about the standout.
You mentioned that you have a website. Do you hear from your readers much, and what kind of things are they saying?
Well, that's a mixed bag, too. Not everybody loves your work. I've heard from people all over the world, and I've gotten 5-star reviews and 1-star reviews. I've been compared to Anne McCaffrey, which I thought was a big honor. For a sense of honor, I was just totally flabbergasted by that. I'm very surprised at how people, I think it's more on society, how they've grown up today, are more towards putting you down than picking you up. I had a person in London for Ripper's Row that got mad because my vampire drank liquor. So insistent that there is no way a vampire would do that. They only drink blood. Well, it's my story. Sorry you don't like that.
That's why they call it fantasy.
Yeah.
And fiction.
And I've had a lot of people be real critical of Jack the Ripper. I'm very surprised at how critical England is of Jack the Ripper lore. If you don't get it right, they hate you, which is crazy because he was a bad guy. And they're somewhat supporting him, even though in my books, Jack the Ripper turns out to be a pretty good guy, but he's pretty ruthless.
He's trying to save the town.
Yeah, trying to save the world. That's the fun part.
So we talked about responses on the website. What about actually when you do a book signing? Have you had anybody come up to you and say, hey, man, it was a fantastic book. I loved it. Or, dude, what were you thinking?
Face to face, it's usually positive. People have a harder time cutting you down when they're looking you in the eye. But I'm always appreciative of the family. I've gotten letters from Beloit College and stuff like that that has just totally surprised me, unexpected. Good way to lighten up the day, if you're having a hard day, trying to figure something out.
Out of all your books that you've written, the Ripper series, Welcome to Plainfield, Little Valley, Wolves of Springfield, do you have a favorite?
Well, just like any author, they're all your children. Favorite? Oh, boy. My favorite right now is my February release, Chicago Undead. That's a story that I like the most. Welcome to Plainfield was the most challenging because I actually had real things that I wanted to put down and share with people. And most people, if you're not in the paranormal field, think you're cuckoo. Sense of Honor is probably it is my oldest child. That story grew with me. Because it is divided into two sections, you can read what I wrote 11 years ago and you can read what I wrote 5 years ago. And I think you can see somewhat of a different person writing.
You do grow through the years as you're writing. I think each book should, anyway, get better. Now, you mentioned what you thought might be your favorite book right now, which is not the unpublished Chicago Undead. So you should be looking forward to reading that one, everybody. Just because you have that as your favorite book doesn't mean you have a favorite character from that book. Do you have a favorite character that you've written?
That has to be Tyree Loveland from the Tides of War series. It's a halfling. Everyone knows fantasy. You know what a halfling is. He is actually a D&D character that I played in high school. And I totally forgot about him. Then 30 years after graduation, I put him in a book. And when I got done with the book, I realized who it was. I still have the D&D sheet with the character on it.
In D&D being Dungeons and Dragons?
Okay. Yeah. He is the most embodiment of a character that I've ever came with. I love that character. That is one character I will not kill off, even if the story calls for it, because in the 5th book in the Tides of War series, which will come out in fall, he almost does. But I forced myself to make him live, even though the story called for him to die.
So that was an internal conflict on your part, just because he was your favorite character.
That was very, very hard. It was very hard because the storyline said, do this. And I'm like, no. And it was really hard to figure out how to do it. And I actually had to rewrite a scene in the book 3 times to figure out how to get him out of the situation without being destroyed. And it was really, really hard.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Okay, I think we touched a little bit on this earlier, but what advice would you give to anyone of any age about writing?
Just do it. And that's simple. Like I said, 1,000 words every day. If you don't have time for 1,000 words, 500. But make the time every day. Like I've done with Ted all the time. You always get emails from me on Facebook. Did you sit down and write today? Did you do it?
And just in case you're wondering, I did sit down and write a lot today.
Yeah, so that's the thing. And I find I'll wake up in the middle of the night, got the idea, write it down. Always keep a pad and pencil with you. Some people can only now write on the computer. I write everything first draft longhand.
You still write longhand?
I still write longhand. For one, it's a way to copyright protect yourself. And it's kind of hard to understand, but I feel more connection with the book when I'm holding the pencil and writing on the paper.
Well, you have a lot of people who feel that connection with a regular book anyway, as far as book or ebook. So, to me, writing it longhand, though I could never do that in a million. First off, I probably couldn't read what I wrote because of my handwriting, so thank goodness for computers. But I kind of understand where you're coming from on that one.
Yeah, I write like a doctor. Only I can read my writing. But that's the way I do it. I have stacks and stacks and stacks of notebooks. But that also helps you down the line because, there is encryption if you write everything in the computer and you save it as a file, there's a timestamp that's on the file. But those can be changed. If you write things longhand, because there's a big problem with ebooks now being pirated. Somebody will like your book, they will take your name off of it, put their names on it, and republish it. Smashwords, through Barnes & Nobles, through Amazon, and then you get into the copyright problem. And you don't always find out that your book's there and someone stole it from you. But when you do, that's the hard part of getting your rights back, getting that book taken away, and sometimes you got to sue somebody for stealing your stuff. You got to have that chain of evidence. If you write things longhand and when you're done with the book, you seal it in an envelope and mail it to yourself. Do not open it up again. That right there is your copyright protection of your book.
But could you A, put it on the cloud, or B, email it to yourself, which would have a time and date stamp on it as well?
Not always, because people know it's more easier to change a timestamp on a computer than it is to change a federal postal code.
But you could also save it to a hard drive as well. Or not your hard drive or your flash drive. Or,
that's the.
I'm just being the
that's
devil's
the
advocate.
technology thing. But that's what I've learned over the years. Easiest way to do a copyright if you don't do it through the Library of Congress, which it costs $75 to copyright your book, I think.
But in the big picture,
yeah, well, it's a jury, what you want to do. Do you want to trust people and think that they're not going to steal from you? Great. I do that a lot, but I have those copies on hand. First draft, second draft, third draft, always printed out, always sealed. That way, if something happens, I got something I can fall back on.
Well, I have one final question for you. And you're going to laugh at this, but that's okay. If you're stranded on a desert island somewhere and you could only pick 3 books, what would they be and who would they be by?
That's really hard because I like a lot of different writers. Maybe The Unabridged Stand by Stephen King. Simple fact is it is so long. Maybe Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, J.K. Rowling's. That's a good book. That's a classic.
Well, she's an inspiration if you're an upcoming writer because of her background.
Yeah.
And being really, living a hard life. And then now she's, richer than the queen. So
not any longer. She used to be the number one richest woman in the world because so many people helped her along the way. She donates a lot of her money to charities that helped her. So now she was up here, hey, I'm richer than the queen. Now she's down here just below the queen. So she was a billionaire. She no longer is, but her money went to something good.
Okay, so you have The Stand, and you have Harry Potter and Sorcerer's Stone. How about your third one?
Book. No, that's real fun. Okay, Green Eggs and Ham.
It's funny because I was just thinking Bartholomew and the Oobleck, which is by Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
So
can't beat the classics.
No, I don't think you can. We appreciate you stopping by and visiting with me today. Hope you can come again sometime.
Glad to do it.
Thanks a lot.